Beis, Volume 2. We are on the page, top of page 1092. 1192, sorry. 1192. Aleph Kuf Tzadik Beis. 1192. And if you want to follow along and don't have the text, go to ayinbeis.com, please. Okay. Is Yitzchak on the call from Palo Alto?
Yes, I'm here.
So first I want to voice my appreciation and also surprise that you not only listened to them all, you also transcribed it. That's amazing. Okay.
It's my honor. It was a great opportunity. They say, asking you shall receive. I was asking a lot of questions about the Rishimu in the last class, and I understand your frustration now because there's so much there, and so that was a very helpful reference. And now I don't know about an expert in Rishimu, but certainly a lot further down the road than I was in the last class, and
that's good.
It's great stuff. Yeah.
Thank you. I wouldn't use the word frustration. It's just the reality. When you're learning, there's so many subjects, it's just impossible to cover them all thoroughly. But let's put it this way. You've earned your right to ask. You always could ask questions, but now especially you paid your dues. You did that work. It definitely is the way to go, because to me, it all comes down to, we can learn as much as we can learn in these classes, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down how much you review and research and do your own homework as much as possible. So just pointing out.
100%.
Thank you again.
100%.
Chassidus is a journey, as we've talked about many times. Okay, I didn't check it out yet. I will look at it and I'll give you my thoughts. I just wanted to acknowledge it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to sum up where we are at, is we're discussing the pasuk V'yadaita Yem v'shavesa levavecha ki Hashem hu Elokim b'shamayim imal va'aretz mitachas einoid. The focus on the two phrases b'shamayim imal va'aretz mitachas, referring to two levels of das actually. In V'yadaita Hayoim V'yadaita. And Hashavesa Levavecha, two levels of recognition and awareness and feelings in the divine, and one is the Ir HaGvul, in other words, discovering and recognizing the divine energy within existence, that's Aretz Mitachas. And then Shemayim Mimal, which we're in the middle of right now, which is the Ir HaBligvul. Shemayim Mimal, the Ir HaBligvul. As a matter of fact, I just had a little epiphany. We've been discussing why it says al ha'aretz mitachas, and why it says b'shamayim mimal. Why not b'ha'aretz mitachas? So we spoke about the Targum Onkelos, but I just was thinking that if indeed they are Ir HaBligvul and Ir HaGvul respectively, so then it makes sense that the Ir HaGvul al ha'aretz mitachas actually means on the earth below, not in the earth below, upon, which may actually work well when you're talking about Ir HaGvul, because Gvul by definition means levels and structures and midah. So al is a structural term you would use. Upon, above. Bishamayim imal means within, is not so much structure, it means it permeates the whole reality. So maybe that's why, he doesn't say it explicitly, I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe that with what he's saying here, maybe we can explain why the verse says b'shamayim imal, because talking about bligvul, which is really everywhere. That's the whole point, that it has no limits. It's just that the Tzimtzum concealed it from us. And now we're in the process of discovering it. So it's b'shamayim imal, within it all, so to speak. But the Ir HaGvul, its focus is more not about that it's everywhere, but more that it is above, in other words, in the structure, you're discovering the divine within the structure. Maybe not. Anyway, just a thought that as I was summing it up now, it just came to me. Okay, but to go back to Shammai Mimal, so what he says here is that's referring to the Eira Bligvul. And the Eira Bligvul, so of course then comes the question, what does it add? Remember, the big question he had asked is, what do you need both? Once you say God is in existence, why do you have to say both expressions, on the earth below and the heaven above and on the earth below? So he's explaining the Maila of Eir HaBligvul. What does it teach us that the Eretz B'tachas does not teach us? So he's telling us, so he began by saying, because it carries, first of all, it reflects Atzmus. Its focus is on its source, not on the creation. Number two, that it's not a midah v'gvul, it's not in measure. It has an element of the Ein Sof, of Bligvul. And whereas the Eir HaGvul is also, and additionally, the Eir HaGvul is subject to the concealment, or in other words, is affected by the concealment, even when it's in a revealed state, suggesting that maybe the Eir HaGvul is not subject, but it is subject because of the Tzimtzum. Okay, doesn't matter, but fine. The psalmist in the parentheses. But the Eir HaBligvul is not that the Eir HaBligvul is subject to the Tzimtzum, it just conceals the Eir HaBligvul. Whereas the Eir HaGvul, even when it's shining, is affected by the Tzimtzum and by the Rishimu and so on. Okay. Then he added, summing up what we learned, that this is even a quality of the infinite light over the finite, even the Pnimius HaEir, Pnimius HaKav. Why? Because even though the Pnimius HaKav is the inner kavana, intention of the divine, and as he said, is a medida atzmis. It's not actual measure. It's only the divine choosing to express himself in measure. Nevertheless, at the end of the day, it's still something that is defined by measure. It's connected to something, whereas the Bligvul reflects it says is mizdame, is similar to God, unfettered, unfiltered, without that additional filter that says, okay, let's now express ourselves in measure. So it's not minimizing the power of the Eir HaGvul, it just means the Eir HaBligvul has something that expresses the entire magnitude of the divine infinity. Okay. Then came the piece, which was the last piece we learned, and just to go over it again briefly, that L'cher Atzmus, Ein Sof of Atzmus, is not like the Ein Sof of Eir HaBligvul. Because the Ein Sof of Atzmus means Shlilos Hakel. It means Ein Sof, not that it has no end and is infinite, that's beyond altogether, is beyond any definition, beyond any expression, not Eir HaGvul, not Eir HaBligvul, not Eir HaGvul, not Chiyuv, not Shlila, Shlilasa Chiyuv, Shlilasa HaGvul, Shlilasa HaBligvul, Shlilasa Chiyuv, Shlilasa Shlila, as he said. So how do you say it's similar? What do you mean it's similar? And on the contrary, Eir Pnimi, the Pnimius Eir has something that's more similar because it reflects that element of Atzmus that combines measure and beyond measure. So his answer was, or explanation was, yet at the same time, there is something to be said about Begilui, seeing Ein Sof Begilui, seeing it revealed in its full glory. So yes, it doesn't reflect on Atzmus, which is beyond full glory too, and beyond infinite, in the infinite. But it has that element of the whole picture that reflects Ein Sof Begoli, as he put it. So even though the Eir Pnimi, the Pnimius Eir, has an element of that Mizdama Mamish, the words he used, El Atzmus, Mizdama Mamish, because of its because it's a combination of opposites, and yet Mizdama Yeser to Ein Sof Begili. And he gave the dugma, which was the last thing we learned, the bottom of page 1191. Kudugma Kazeis is also by the Rishimu. The Rishimu also has an element that the Tzimtzum did not impact, and thus the Rishimu, which is the Koyach HaGvul, not the Eir HaGvul, has in it something that captures something Atzmius. He says, what's the word he used here? I'm just looking here. And nevertheless, it's called a Shimu because at the end of the day, it's one piece, it's one speck when you compare it to Bli Gvul. So it does have something that Bli Gvul itself doesn't have, as we discussed. And he asked, how is it a Rishon? Because the Shimu begins Keich HaGvul, Va'eshnos HaBegins, as a begins Rishon, L'Alga begins Bli Gvul. So from this, we also derive going out to Primis Ha'er, which is the Er HaGvul. Also, even though it has a Gilead Atzmus in a high level, like we described, but Madregel Yena Harbi Yesa them from Er HaBli Gvul, but Kol Mokim Lies Bechinas Lies Bechinas Enes Eva Bli Gvul, top of page 1192, just the last line. Yesh Be Yisrain, the guy Bechinas Primis Ha'er Shabam Kol Mokim Bechinas Medida. Okay. So bottom line, we've established that B'Shamayim Mimal, the revelation, the awareness of God's infinitude and absolutely limitless expression, reveals for us in a revealed way Ein Sof, with all the qualifications that it doesn't reveal other things, correct? Like we discussed, I'm not going to go over it again because I think I discussed it with the difference between a revealedness, a concealed miracle, difference between Ein Arech L'Chon Elam Haza compared to higher levels. The bottom line, Gilui has a mila over Yesh, even though the Yesh connects to Atzmus, but the revealed component, that it should be revealed, meaning revealed that we could experience it, has to it. And that's what Bli Gvul adds. The revelation, not just the Etzem, but Etzem Begilui. That's the key. So when you bring both together, Shamayim Mal V'Aretz Mitachas, it's unbelievable. You have both. You have the qualities of Er HaGvul, even the Primis Er and Primis Ha'er, and you have the quality of Er HaBli Gvul, which gives us a fuller picture of godliness in every possible sense. Okay. Now he's going to give one more addition. This is where we stop. We'll continue. Top line 1 on top of page 1192. He's going to give now another benefit, Yisrael, advantage of infinite light, of Shemayim and Mal, Er HaBli Gvul. But Oid Zeis, moreover, or additional to Shari Be Chinas Primis Ha'er Eina Nimsha B'chol Mokim. Another so-called limit, or you could say, something that Er Primi does not have, it's not Nimsha B'chol Mokim. The whole definition of Er Primi is that it goes to each, tailored to each part of existence. That's why we call it measure, because that's what we need. We need the energy that goes into Chacham is different than in Bina, or Deimim Tzameya Chaim Medaber. That's its quality, that it's measured. But it's not Nimsha B'chol Mokim, it doesn't go everywhere. Rak B'chinas Primis Ha'elamus. Only, okay, he's talking about the Primis Ha'er. Let me correct what I just, not correct, let me just qualify what I just said. That Primis Ha'er, remember, we're talking here the mila of Bli Gvul, Er HaBli Gvul over Primis Ha'er, not over Chitzenius Ha'er. Chitzenius Ha'er, we've already established the quality, because that's really measured. Primis Ha'er is God's intention in it, which is really Medida Atzmis. But at the same time, it doesn't go everywhere. Only in Primis Ha'elamus. Where does the Primis HaKavona, so to speak, God's deeper intention in the Er Primi, where is it Nimshach? In the inner dimension of existence. The Hainu Primis Eser Spheres, which means the inner dimension of the 10 spheres, Uben Neshamis Yisrael, and in the souls of Israel, Dafke. Like in the Maimer, the above Maimer that we referred to, so I'll tell you what page it's on. A while back, it was on page, we spoke about the Neshamis Yisrael. Where was that? I think it was at the end of the Maimer, if I recall correctly. Yeah. I think it's page 1174 that he's referring to right now. So if you look in the middle of the page, you'll say, B'chinas Primis HaKav, Hu Shanim Shem B'chinas Primis V'atzmus Ein Sof, V'hi Hamshach L'Neshamis Yisrael B'frat. So this is like, and I'll explain this, just give me 1 second, I want to just see one thing here. So, if you remember then, I explained it this way, and it's a very basic explanation. You're building a house. So we talked about the example, or for that matter, art. There's two things. There's the actual building of the structure, and then there's the purpose of why you're building the structure. Now, the person who's building it, the one who's commissioned the building of it, the owner, the original one who envisioned having a house, he knows exactly why he wants this house. The builders themselves, especially the detail builders, they may have no clue. They just know they have to do this. They do their job well. They're good bricklayers and good plumbers and good electricians and good designers, and they do their job excellent. But they might not have to know or are not privy to all the deeper intention. Why is he building this mansion? But then, let's say in this case, the creator of the building wants to build his home for his children, for his son, for his daughter. So he knows who's going to be moving in. That's the whole kavanah of it. Seif ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. When it comes to the shtalshlus, which is the building God created, there are a few things. There's also these two things. There's the divine energy that is instructed, like the department heads in the example with the chief of staff. They're instructed, this is what you need to do. You have to craft a world called Ak. The Kav is instructed, a world called Adam Kadman, and Akudim, and Vrudim, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, Spheres, Chachma, Bina, Das, Parsais, partitions, the whole thing. Each part of it is instructed and is doing what it has to do. The Pnimis HaKav is carrying the so-called inner DNA of the Kavanah Pnimis of the Creator. Now, obviously, in the Moshel, even the Chetzenis HaKav is still godliness. But its focus is on the job, on its function, not on the Kavanah Pnimis. In the case of, let's say, with the chief of staff, with the king, so the chief of staff may not even know the Kavanah Pnimis either, to be honest. But let's, for argument's sake, he does. So in other words, not every the one who's directing the project needs to know, because they need to know what you want to get out of it. But the specific functionaries or the specific craftspeople, their focus is on the specific, what needs to be done specifically. So the Pnimis HaKav, or he calls Pnimis HaEr, is not something that's obvious in the structure of existence. So who knows it? The Pnimis HaElemus, meaning the inner dimension of the worlds, are aware of it. And the Shamas Yisrael, who are sent to this world to communicate this kavanah. So even though the nations of the world are also created by God, and they also fulfill their intention, but who so-called are the witnesses or the people of the book that were like conveying the message are the Neshamas Yisrael. So they carry the Pnimis HaKavanah. It would be like a king saying to his people, build a city. And they don't know why. Just build me a city. I want to have in it these and these things. They build a city. And then God, the creator, the king, sends his special messenger, envoy, or his children, to come tell the people, and this is the reason, this is the purpose of existence. Like we spoke about the creation of the world. 6 days God created heaven and earth, and all in it, everything in it. At the end of the sixth day, the Eibishter sent his special guest. Now comes Adam and Chava. Adam and Eve come into the world in Gan Eden, and what do they bring to the table? They bring the purpose. They elevate the whole world. Rosh Hashanah. They say, now, we were all created. There's a purpose. That's why Adam knew the names to give each creature, because he knew the Pnimis HaKavanah in each part of existence. So essentially what he's saying here is that the Er HaGvul, the Pnimis of the Er Pnimi, it's not obvious everywhere, because it's the inner so-called, the inside story behind existence. So what does that mean? It's the Pnimis of Esespheres, and it's in the Neshamas Yisrael, like I just pointed out the page, 1174, we discussed it earlier. Yeah. Okay. Ubakol mokim shenimshach. Back to the pnimi. They're talking about the pnimi. Harihu b'shava. Wherever it's nimshach, it's equal because it's one kavana. So it's equal in all these places. Why? Because hu b'chinas ha'er atzmi mamish. Because remember, the pnimi ha'er is ha'er atzmi, meaning it's coming straight from the source who wants that this specific the track of energy should create existence. The outer part of it creates the function, is focused on the function, creates the actual structure. The inner part of the air is carrying the divine message of what is the intention in all this air pnimi. So it's an equal, wherever it is, it's equal. But by definition, its hamshach is only in the inner pnimis. So it's not a contradiction what he just said. When he says everywhere equal, he means everywhere in the pnimis. Wherever it is, it's equal. But it's not everywhere because it does not permeate and it's not obvious on the outer level. When you're building the building, you see a building going up. You don't necessarily know what the kavanah primis of this building is until you speak to someone that is privy, is aware of that primis kavanah. But by contrast, now, ubchinas eden sof habligvul, on the other hand, hu shemer b'kol mokim. Eden sof habligvul radiates everywhere, inner and outer. Like when we say, kamo yistalik, yikored de kuchebricha b'kula almin. That's the expression from Zohar, kadis kaf yisitra achre. He brings this in the beginning of Basi Legani, the Frierdiker Rebbe. So it says, Istalik yikore de kutchebrichu b'kula alma. So what is this? Istalik refers to makif. It doesn't mean expiring. It's yikore de kutchebrichu b'kula alman, the hainu b'kula alman b'shava. Because being an makif, it encompasses everything. The mishum zeh, and due to this is another reason. Yesh gamken yisrin b'hamshach hazu. There's a yisrin, there's an advantage of the era bligvul over the era gvul. Pnimius era gvul. Now let's explain what did he just add here, and what does this mean exactly? Because on one hand, you could ask the obvious question: didn't we say that the first effect of the tzimtzum is in the era bligvul, that it should be concealed from all of existence? Now you're suddenly saying it's everywhere equal. So the answer to that obviously is because we're talking about v'yedaita Ayin. We're talking about the hamshacha of the era bligvul. In other words, transforming the tzimtzum and drawing and becoming aware of this era bligvul. And secondly, what does it mean that everything is equal? So the answer could be obvious. Let me just explain it. I'll explain it with also, what does this add to what we said earlier? It seems like when we said earlier, Ein Sof, Begilui, it's revealed Ein Sof. So what he's adding here, it appears to me at least, he's adding that this era bligvul, everything in existence can experience it. Now remember, when I say experience, does not mean in a primistic way. Because by definition, because it's a makif, it's all encompassing and it's everywhere, means that it's not internalized, different between one place and another. But on the other hand, it is an all-encompassing divine energy. So in addition to what he said before, that it's Ein Sof Begoli, that we're experiencing the magnitude of God's infinity, there's another element that everyone experiences it, and everything experiences it. In the Eir HaGvul, so the Chesenius for sure is limited to each particular creature and creation according to its needs. The Pnimius is exclusive only to those that are aware of what's going on inside, the inside story, the insiders, so to speak. And the Eir HaBligvul is something everyone and everything can access, no matter who they are, even the most external elements. How does that express itself practically? Let's say in the example I gave before. For example, building a structure so the insiders know what's the purpose. This secret structure is being created for a purpose that's going to be the mansion of the king's great new heir to the throne. Okay. The rest of the people working on it and the structure itself is not aware of that in a revealed way. What does Eirab Ligvul do? What are they aware of when you talk about Eirab Ligvul? So if you may recall, in volume 1, he spoke about the effects of Eirab Ligvul on existence. One of the things he said, if you may remember, was, remember the Inyan of Shgocha Protis and Mesiris Nefesh. He talked about all-encompassing experiences that everybody can access, even those that are not necessarily completely familiar with anything. I'll just give an example. On Simchas Torah, we say it's Mahakofis, it's Makif. And because it's Makif, on one hand, it's a very high level energy. On the other hand, it's all encompassing. Men, children, scholars, non-scholars, lay people, all dance. The Sefer Torah is wrapped up, and everybody's experiencing Er HaBligvul. Even those that may not even be aware of the deeper teachings about Simchas Torah. Even this concept itself, that Er HaBligvul is an encompassing thing, it's the people who learn Chassidus who know that. But when it comes to the dancing, everybody dances. So the Er HaBligvul encompasses all people. It defies and transcends differences. When it comes, for example, to learning Torah, not everybody comes to the same shiur. If it's a shiur given by a great scholar to other scholars, they understand. If someone else sat in, he wouldn't appreciate it. I'm not talking about excluding someone. It just, in Pnimius, you only appreciate what you understand. If you don't understand it, what's the point? Now, again, I'm not saying someone can't sit and bask in the Giluyim of great people's learning, even if they don't understand it. But I'm talking about in a way that is appreciated. So Pnimius, by definition, is something that is not shaykh to everyone equally, because that's why it's a Pnimi. But a Makif and a Bligvul can encompass everyone and everything. It's just an example. Here he's talking obviously in a broader scale. He's talking about Kol Ha'elam as B'Shava. That there's when you're Mamshech Ha'er Makif, you're Mamshech something that encompasses every part of existence. Whereas Pnimi, Er Pnimi does not. So therefore you have a second Yisrin in Shemayim Mimal, that the Yadaita Ayin, but Shemayim Mimal is that it's everything. It encompasses everything equally. There's Bligvul. So now you have an experience of godliness, of Bligvul, with everything and everyone. Whereas in Pnimi Sa'er, all the other things that we learned before are part of it. Number one is that it focuses on existence, and it's measured. And like he said, and now this last point is that Pnimius, it's only for the level of Pnimius Ha'elamis, Spheres and Neshamis and so on. So now it all rounds out that you have all the milas. If you go to Shamayim and Mal, each one has something that the other one doesn't have in expressing and experiencing and being aware of, v'yadaita, being aware of and experiencing Elikus. You have the Bligvul in Shamayim and Mal, you have the Gvul in Aretz B'tachas, and Pnimius HaGvul as well, Pnimius Ha'er, Pnimius HaKav as well in that Aretz B'tachas. Okay. And I think this even intensifies what I said before, Ala Aretz B'tachas. Because Bishamayim Mimal means within, so it's all equalizer. Ala Aretz Mitachas means it's above Al, it's on the land, on the earth, which seems to indicate more of a location. It's more has a particular location. Ala Aretz Mitach. So maybe that's because of its Gvul element that's not equal everywhere. Maybe. Okay. Even though B'Shamayim Hamal sounds more Pnimi and Al Aretz B'tachas sounds more Makiv, but there's also the other side of it. Okay, anybody want to ask anything? Because now he's going to conclude the connection to Shemayim Hamal, which was coming to explain the idea of heaven above, Er HaBligvul, the infinite energy. But in case there's something needs clarity here, till here, if you want to ask, go ahead. If not, I'll continue. Okay. V'zeh inyan ke'avayu alakim b'shamayim mimal. And this is the inyan of the pasuk, the first statement, that avayu alakim v'dayta yom v'shavis alakim.
Page. Which page?
1192. And this is the inyan ke'avayu alakim b'shamayim mimal, the heaven above. Hainu gili b'chinas ha'erein sof shalifnei atzimtzum, which means the revelation of the infinite light of the Erein Sof, pre-Tzimtzum, Hainu ha'esh and istalik al yedei Tzimtzum. Remember, the first impact of the Tzimtzum was what? That the Eir Habligvul, you go back to page 1190, he said the two impacts that he quoted from Vayihi Anan, the Maimer Vayihi Anan. Mashem istalik Erein Sof shalifnei Tzimtzum hu Erein Sof Habligvul. First thing was concealing that divine, all omnipresence of the divine before the tzimtzum that doesn't leave room for elemis, he says, where the elemis are, the lashon there is yeah. So now we're talking v'yadai tayem is reversing the process. That we're talking about, we're revealing, we're transforming that part of the tzimtzum by recognizing, by vayadaita, recognizing avayu elikim, that the elikim, the tzimtzum, remember, elikim is the tzimtzum, not the first tzimtzum of avayu dilatata, which was the ir hagvul, al oretz mitachas. But now we're talking about that the ir shenistalik idea tzimtzum, the tzimtzum had an impact at this infinite light was concealed in order for existence, the space for the identity of existence to emerge. So this is what we're talking about. This is what we're discussing now, revealing that infinite light, that divine omnipresence, the magnitude of God's infinity. We'll move on, and it's understood. The Sheidah Sham Shochi L'mayla Maha'er Shenistalik Bilvad. Okay, he's adding now another point. Now, here's the thing. Before the Tzimtzum, there's a state of the divine presence, consciousness dominates, and there's nothing else there. Anything else is not that's the only thing that exists. Ein Sof. In order to create space for another reality, an independent consciousness, Hashem made a tzimtzum, concealed that consciousness, not from himself and not from itself, only from the space that is left. It's this teacher, so-called receding, in order to leave space for the student to appear. The student is now there. The work now is to bring it back, but in a way that does not annihilate the makabel, the student, the recipient. So we do this through a slow process. First comes a kav of narrow ray of light that begins to bring a divine consciousness into the space, creating the worlds. In the context of Avodah, revealing the divine slowly through our work of recognizing the divine, the Ayin of the Yesh Anivra in every part of existence. Now slowly you're waking your way up and you're ready to now experience the divine infinity, not the Erakav, that which was there before the Tzimtzum happened in the first place. The second impact of the Tzimtzum we addressed. That's making the Kav, that's the Tzimtzum in the Erakav, in the Eragvul, that should allow it all to be measured and fit into existence. But now we're ready to transform and say, what is Elikus like? What is the experience of the divine like pre-Tzimtzum? Not within the Kav, but pre-Tzimtzum, meaning that divine omnipresence, that divine Bligvul. So that's the work we do. So the question now is, well, I don't know if it's a question. So what are we doing? Are we just getting back the light that was there, the energy that was there pre-Tzimtzum in the first place? which is also a chiddush, by the way. Why? Because now we can receive it. When it was shining in the beginning, before existence, there was no room for anything else. Now the student has emerged, the student has expanded and matured and grown his containers, so now he can receive even the Ein Sof Abligvul. Not in a keli, but at least experiencing something that is beyond the structure of existence. So the Rebbe Rashab is saying, move on, it's understood that the root of this hamshacha, in other words, drawing the light back now, is not just going back to what was there before. It's higher, you're achieving a higher level of revelation than only that which was removed. This is a chiddush. Because in order for it to return and illuminate, after it was concealed, to do that, you need to draw something from a higher level. Because the tzimtzum has powerful impact. Remember that tzimtzum is not some side show. It's God's power to restrain himself. Well, I should say to restrain his energy, to restrain his revealed consciousness. So that's coming from a divine place, hein gvureso, of God's power, koyach hagvul, the power of gvul. So how do we override God's power of gvul? God created the tzimtzum. He's the one that chose to conceal that infinite light. So he says, in order to do so, you need to reach into the divine place that's even higher than the power that concealed it in the first place. That's why you're able to reveal it. That's what he's saying here. So you need hamshacha from a higher level, even higher than the koyach hagvul, and that's what the avodas ha'adam v'yadaita yem v'shavesa levavecha. We achieve that. So now he's going to go back and say, and this is what is achieved through what we said before. If you remember in the beginning when he discussed this whole discussion on page 1190, how did he begin this whole discussion about he started that there are times where we see Beis Pamim Havayu Elikim. By Matan Torah, it only said once, Anochi Hashem Elikecha. There's one Hashem and Elikim. But there are times like by Eliyahu Novi on Hara Carmel, on Mount Carmel, where it was said twice. He hasn't yet explained what is this double Havayu Elikim. So the Rebbe Rashab began by first explaining, I'm reading from page 1190. I'm summing up, just to tie it all together. He said, to understand that, let's discuss the tzimtzum. That the tzimtzum has two impacts. One on Eir HaBligvul, one on Eir HaGvul. Shemayim Emal Ha'aretz Mitachas refers to transforming the first. Shemayim Emal is transforming actually the second impact on the finite energy. Shemayim Emal is about revealing and transforming the tzimtzum in the first impact on the infinite energy. And now he's coming back and saying, and that requires a greater hamshachah. So he says, "V'zeu shegab Eliyahu nemar," and this is what by Eliyahu, the story in an Eliyahu Novi. But it says there, Beis Pamim Havayu Elikim, twice Havayu Elikim, Havayu Elikim. What's this double Havayu Elikim? V'hainu. The first one is Havaya of the cosmic order, Havaya dilatata, which he never actually said Havaya dilatata. He only used Havaya dileila, but I'm just using it. The Havaya that relates to Seder Shtalshlus, Shezeu b'derech klal, b'chinas ha'er shalahoyer ha'elamis. That in general is the divine energy that radiates and illuminates the worlds. Liyaz gili erzeh. So the first Havaya Elikim is saying that the Elikim, the Tzimtzum, in the Eir HaGvul, in the finite energy, is really Havaya. So you're revealing the Havaya in that state. And the second one is Va'amru Oid Havaya Elikim, and they said a second time, another Havaya Elikim, Hainu Gili B'chinas Havaya de Le'ela. This is revealing the higher Havaya, Shezeu B'chinas Ein Sof HaBligvul. This is the infinite divine light, the infinite light. So there you have it. you have two dimensions of Havayu Elikim. So in other words, the pasuk v'yadaita yem v'shaves alecha ke'Havayu Elikim is referring to both. Havayu Elikim b'shamayim amal is the bligvul. Havayu b'aretz metachas is the era gvul. Okay, that ends this paragraph. So I'll just. One second. I'm going to take questions in a minute. Let me just say one thing before I clear. I found it interesting that the Rebbe Rashab, when it comes to Eira Bligvul, he says the Sheirish Hamshach has to be higher than the one that concealed. Why didn't he say the same thing by Eira Gvul? That the Eira Gvul is subject to the Tzimtzum, so the energy goes into each part of existence. Our Avodah is to transform it, to reveal the divine. Actually, he may say there too. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, he says that it radiates a level that's l'mayla me'salmus, that's higher than the concealment. So you know what? Maybe I strike that question because he did say that on page 1190. Okay, so in both of them, something is achieved. One is revealing the divine that was concealed within existence. One is revealing the divine that's beyond existence, the bligvul that we just discussed. And these are the two Havayu Elikim, and that's the meaning b'shamayim emal v'aretz metachas. Very good. Okay, I think I explained it. Anybody wants to ask something or comment, feel free. This is now the time. Good.
Just one question. It says that the pnimius is b'shava, because it's the atzmi mamish.
Yeah.
Is that referring to the that comes through Seder Ishtalshalos?
In the pnimius elements of Seder Ishtalshalos. I explained, for example, when you're building a structure, the ones that know what the pnimius kavana is in the structure, those that know it, are aware it's an equal knowledge whether you're building the living room or the dining room. They're both part of one pnimius hakavana. It's an atzmi that equalizes everything, but it's only known by the insiders, not by the outsiders.
So so in that I mean, in a lot of places in Chassidus, it explains that the difference between the pnimi and the sevev is that the sevev is everywhere b'shava. So he's saying that's only that difference is only in chitzonius of Ishtalshalos.
No, because he's also saying here that the pnimi is only b'shava in the pnimius, not everywhere. He says that here too, even about pnimius. He says it's b'shava for those that are insiders, in the inside level. He says. But the Amshach is only in Pnimius, and the Habligvul, the Sevev, is everywhere. Pnimius and Chetzenius. You see the line?
Yeah.
So he's also qualifying that it's not everywhere. It's everywhere in the Pnimius. But that's why I gave the example with a building right now. You can build a building, and all the parts of the building are permeated by the inner kavana equally, but it's only on the inner kavana. It's only there, not on the outer.
So where would it not be Shabbat?
Ask all the workers. Ask all the workers in the building. They're not aware of the.
So I'm saying that in that mashal, what would be an example of people that of the ideas that are not known equally?
All the workers, everybody watching it, everybody else except the select few that know what the inner intention is in building this building.
So okay. So I'll go back to Inyan, that we know there's a thing where it's not shava. Everyone has a different, has it gets a different level of
In Pinimis, that's how it works. Yeah.
Can I continue in this vein? It seems like Malakal means everywhere. So those who are aware of the Panemius are also equally aware of the Panemius everywhere. It just doesn't touch, maybe those aren't Shayach, but anybody who's Shayach to Panemius, it's found equally. Kol Makom.
Yeah, that's correct. The ones that are familiar, look, the ones that are familiar with the Pnimius HaKavana, there's no difference between the living room and the dining room, between Atzilus and Bria, because you're talking about the Atzmi here. We're talking about the Pnimius of the Pnimius HaEr, of Pnimi, the Pnimius of Pnimi, the Pnimius HaKav. And I explained at length, that's like the inner intention in what the Pnimi is meant to achieve. But that itself is not aware, is not revealed to every part of this structure. That's why Atzilus is not Bria and Bria is not Yitzira. The Pnimius of Atzilus and the Pnimius of Bria share something in common, but not the actual structures themselves and the Oyer that relates to their specific details. To use
I have
the
a
example of
question.
the 6 days of creation, the 6 days of creation, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, until human being, each one is aware of their level. That's it. They're not aware of the Pnimius HaKavana. The human being comes in and he understands the Pnimius of them all. So in that sense, there's a certain equality in that.
In other words, you mean the Jewish human being is aware?
Well, Adam is the source of all Shamas, so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Yitzhak, you want to ask a question? I have another question also.
Mine's more general, so why don't you go ahead?
Okay, mine's very general also. On the level of Havayu Hulakim, Mitzad Chidash Olam, of the Ayin of the Yeshed Nifra, since the non-Jewish world have a connection to Chidash Olam, they know that there's Kol Kapol Nifal through their work, their righteous work in existence. Do they reveal the level of Elokus, which is Shaykh to the Ayin of the Yeshed Nifra?
And I would even say Ayin of Yesh Amiti to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
Everything
They
is
can be
relative.
aware.
Everything is relative.
Okay,
He's
so
not
they can be
speaking here
aware of
about
that
Jews
also.
and non-Jews, just for the record, as you know.
Yes.
He spoke
that's
about that
interesting.
earlier. In the
Yes.
previous mimer, he did speak how the Umas Ha'elam go with Seichel and make a distinction between Shemayim and Mal Aretz Mitachas. He discussed that. But now he didn't mention that. I would say essentially, in general, you're not talking about necessarily the word Neshamas Yisrael here. Is that right? Are you focusing on that?
No, I'm asking a general question,
Okay,
just like you're answering.
in general, once there's remember, once you have V'yadaita Yem V'Shavei Levecha, and it's taught to the world, everybody, relative to their level, can reveal Gvul, Eira Gvul, and Eira Bli Gvul.
Mm-hmm.
Generally
Mamish reveal it.
Generally speaking, you have that even though everyone does both, so it says in Chassidus that the Neshamas Mamshech Eira Seviv, also the energy beyond existence, and the Umas Elam is mostly energy within existence, divine energy. But it's not relevant to our discussion here per se.
Okay, so okay, fine, but very good. But they can mamish experience that level.
Look, this goes back to our discussions about the Jews and non-Jews that we talked about.
Yes.
And if you look in the Sikha, the letter from the Rebbe, page 230 and Chelik Yud Gimel,
Yes, really.
There's clear that there's levels. There's levels. There's no question there are levels. I mean, there it says on the expression that that Cholish V'ish, even a non-Jew can be Miskadish Kedesh Kedoshim. Holy of holies. That's a pretty high level. You know.
They could not go into the Zor to bring a korban like they couldn't go into Ezras Israel. They would not be able to do that.
I tell you the truth, as I said, this is a subject of its own, deserves its own discussion. I don't want to go off on a tangent now.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So
Anybody?
my question is very general. You might even say, you may want to just point me somewhere instead of talk about it, but it's just basically maybe Ayin Beis 101. I have a question about terminology in connection with the whole Seder Hishtalshelus, which is we talk about that with the Tzimtzum we say a concealment of or bleak vul in this oilam, the lower world, but it's really a withdrawal. And then when we say, and then we withdrawal of light, and then we say when we bring it back with our avoda, we bring it into this world, we say we magala it, we reveal it, but in a sense, we're drawing it down, we're mamshich it. And I guess I'm struggling with a little bit just terminology. I understand what's happening here, but it's maybe it's a paradox, because we say God is everywhere, right? But either we're revealing what's already here, in which case it wasn't withdrawn, or we're drawing it down, in which case it was sort of not here per se in the oblique sense. And so I guess I'm just trying to ask you for a fundamental question: are we drawing down what's not here? Are we revealing what is here? And if it's here, then what's the withdrawal from the tzimtzum? I'm just trying to understand essentially what's the difference in megala and mamshich. They are different.
And you're asking what is the silik exactly?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, if you noticed, I never used the word withdrawal, because the Alter Rebbe establishes in Shiur Yuchad V'Amunah, chapter 7, that it's not simtzum kipshute. So I always stay away from the word withdrawal because it implies physical space. So the first thing is, I use the word concealment. We can talk about, however, concealment in many ways. Concealed can be, you just take an object and you conceal it and hide it in your hands. But you could also conceal something in a much more fundamental way, that it's not just opening your hands and you see it, that it becomes so concealed, it's as if it's not here. As if. So the first thing you need to keep in mind, the first thing I mentioned, that Tzimtzum is not literal. Second thing you have to keep in mind, that we're not talking about physical realities here. You could say something is not in this room, I take it out of this room, and then I bring it back. That would be like withdrawing, removing, and retrieving. That's not the way to look at this, because there's no space involved. So you can't really say the godliness left and returned, as a human being would leave a room and return. So it's much better to say concealed. Question is how deeply concealed, and what kind of work will be needed to retrieve it. So when you say Gilui and Hamshach in that context, he just said this here. You could have Gilui on a very basic level. It was concealed for a day, or for a year, or for 100 years, and then you revealed it, which is also a chiddush. Why? Because it was concealed. There was a reason it was concealed. So at least now you draw. But then there's what he calls like a hamshacha from even a higher place. Sometimes you need to go deeper to be able to draw it out. I'll give an example. Every human being is born, a healthy human being is born with a natural immunity system, a natural immune system. And God forbid, if there's an infection, the body goes into its healing mode to try to eliminate and counter the infection. There are times, God forbid, where the infection or some other intrusion is too strong for the immunity system, and you need to do something. You need to intervene with stronger drugs, greater exercise, or for that matter, even surgery. Now, when you regain health, is it just revealing what was concealed, or did you draw now deeper strengths from perhaps the soul itself? Or maybe exercise, when you really exercise something, suddenly, is it new strengths, or was it there in potential in the muscles before you exercise, or in the other parts of the body? So it all comes down to what level you're talking about. If you're talking about, I lost a little strength today because something happened, and I do a little extra work, and I just get back to where I was, that's very much, you just came back, you returned to the point of departure, to the point, and there's nothing. But if you indeed had a very serious concealment or a serious block, and you then dug deeper and found even greater strength, you can call that a hamshacha from a deeper place. So this is a discussion in Chassidus that talks about when you make a dira b'tachtenim, when you make it for a home, for the God in this, for the divine in this world, is it Gilead Helam or is it Yesh Ma'ayin? Because on one hand, Elikus is everywhere, and all the sins and everything just concealed it. On the other hand, there's a chiddush, if you take tachtenim that are fundamentally selfish, aniv afsi eid, and you transform them to become channels for godliness, is that just Gilead Helam? No, there's a chiddush. You broke the taivas of the Yetzer Hara. You broke the temptations and all the things that seduce us in this world, and you become a more refined person. So
It's even greater.
answers ultimately, one second, Chassidus ultimately answers that there's an element of Gilead Helam, there's an element of Chiddush and Yesh Ma'ayin. So it's a broader subject in general, but that's briefly the way to understand it. It all comes down to where you're at, how much you've achieved. When the Geula will come, when Mashiach comes, we're told it's not just going to be, oh, we're back to square one when the beginning of creation. The years that we struggled and the Mesiras Nefesh in this material world is going to reveal divine levels that were never existent, because it's more than just revealing that which was there. Now, obviously, Atzmos is not impacted by all of this, but the question is, how much of Atzmos do we experience? And that's where it comes down to the different levels as we talk about this.
Got it. Thank you very much. Actually, your example of a sick person is a good one. They say when you break an arm, when they repair it, very often the arm as repaired is stronger than the arm was before it was broken.
It's like the example in Halacha, Shtar Sheyotzel of Irur. A contract that was challenged and upheld is stronger than the original contract.
Got it. Thank you.
I'm using a legal example.
Shkoyach.
Okay, so let us stop here at the end of the paragraph on page 1192, and we'll resume tomorrow. Yeah.